Senator Cruz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call up my amendment, SIL 23800. This amendment is very simple. It consists of one sentence. The Supreme Court of the United States shall be composed of 9 justices. There has been considerable debate about the efforts of the radical left and the Democrat Party to pack the United States Supreme Court, to add 4 left-wing justices immediately to the court to grow the number from 9 to 13 because Democrats are unhappy with the decisions that are being issued by the Supreme Court. When FDR tried to pack the court, it was widely recognized to be a grotesque abuse of power, undermining the rule of law. That was true then. It's true now. Some Democrats in this body claim, at least when they return home and talk to their constituents, that they do not support packing the Supreme Court. This amendment is an opportunity to go on record and be clear whether or not you support packing the court. I would urge adoption of the amendment.
Thank you, Senator. The Constitution, of course, does not stipulate the number of Supreme Court justices. That is a decision of Congress. We have a long history of altering the makeup of the court. The number of justices has changed 6 times before we landed on the number 9 in 1869. There's only one living senator who has changed the size of the Supreme Court. That is Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who shrank the court to 8 seats for nearly a year and for purely political reasons, so he could refuse Merrick Garland's nomination by President Obama. Republicans engaged in court packing plain and simple when they refused to consider then-Judge Garland's nomination in 2016 and then hurried through Justice Barrett's nomination in 2020. My Republican colleagues routinely try to forget and ignore this history. Republicans' insistence now that the Supreme Court must remain at 9 seats and their hysteria over Democrats even discussing a change does not square with that count that I just gave you. Ultimately, however, this amendment is unrelated to the bill before us and the very real need to ensure the courts put in place an enforceable code of conduct. I will therefore oppose the amendment. Anyone else seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
If I could respond briefly, it is true that Congress has the authority to change the number of justices on the court. The last time Congress exercised that authority was in 1869, just after the Civil War. So it has been a long time that we have had 9 justices. That is why when FDR tried to pack the court, even Democrats said this was an abuse of power. It's an interesting commentary that in the 1930s, Democrats in Congress recognized that packing the court would do real damage to the rule of law, to the Constitution. Today, Democrats no longer believe that. The chairman tries to engage in wordplay by saying the Senate exercising advice and consent is somehow packing the court. It is true that when President Obama nominated Merrick Garland, the majority of the Supreme Court made the decision not to confirm him. That is not packing this court. That is exercising the constitutional authority of the Senate to advise and consent, and in that case, to allow the voters to make a decision. Justice Scalia passed away in February of a presidential election year, and the history had been true for 8 decades that when a vacancy occurred in a presidential election year and the Senate was in the opposing party's hands, the Senate did not fill that vacancy, but rather allowed the voters to decide. That's what the Senate did. I understand Senate Democrats are unhappy about that. I also understand Senate Democrats wish Hillary Clinton had won instead of Donald Trump. That's not, in fact, what happened. Packing the Supreme Court means one very specific thing: adding additional seats to change the balance of power because you are unhappy about how the Supreme Court is ruling. It is directly interfering in the administration of justice, and it is profoundly dangerous. And I got to say, it's going to be sad, but it's going to be revealing. The next time some Democrat goes on the trail and says, no, 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 we're not going to pack the court, just remember what you're about to see, which is going to be every Democrat voting against the Supreme Court consisting of 9 justices, because today's Democrats, it is partisanship above all else, including the rule of law. This bill reflects that, and a willingness of Democrats to try to undermine the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. But the willingness to pack the court shows just how radicalized today's Democrats have become.
Chairman.
I'll recognize you in just 1 second, Senator Whitehouse. Perhaps the senator from Texas recalls a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Oversight, which you chaired, and in which you accused the Supreme Court of activism and called for the need to, quote, rein in judicial tyranny over the Obergefell decision. Last month, shortly after the High Court handed down a 5-4 decision that made marriage equality the law of the land, you vowed to propose a constitutional amendment that would effectively upend Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution and subject justices to periodic retention elections. The sacred number 9 was not honored during the month of 2016 because it was last year of Obama's presidency. Unpacking a court by Senator McConnell with the express purpose of a political result. So I still oppose this amendment. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Like so many of our Republican friends' amendments today, this is not related to the bill at hand. And I would note that we are here discussing this because of the ethics mess that has taken place at the Supreme Court. We certainly know that a lot of improper things have happened and have not been disclosed. I think the multiple billionaire-funded private jet flights to various places are pretty self-explanatory as inappropriate. The excuses that have been made to try to justify them don't pass the test of, frankly, what other federal judges would tolerate in a courtroom. And until we know what the true depth is of the problem at the court, it's impossible to know what the appropriate response is. So I have not spoken out in favor of adding a number to the court, but I don't think we should foreclose that in an amendment here because we don't know yet what the whole story here is. We have a lot of investigative work to do to get to the bottom of it. We saw another important article come out just this morning about the nexus between Leonard Leo and his front groups and his billionaires who fund him and one of the justices on the Supreme Court. It just keeps getting worse. So I would urge a no vote on this amendment, and I believe we have a quorum to vote.
On the Cruz Amendment 23800, the clerk will call the roll.